If you grew up in this country between 1950 and 1995, there was a drawer in your house. It was in the garage, or under the kitchen counter, or in a red metal rolling toolbox that smelled like machine oil in your father's hands. And in that drawer, or on that cart, were tools with red handles and chrome steel that caught the light in a way that felt serious. The name on them was Craftsman. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you knew those tools were not going anywhere. You knew because your father told you. You knew because the label said it plainly. You knew because when something broke, you just brought it back. No receipt, no questions, no limit. There is a particular kind of trust that Americans gave to very few things in the 20th century. They gave it to baseball. They gave it to their local doctor. They gave it to Social Security. And they gave it to Craftsman tools. Not because the tools were the most expensive or the most technically advanced. Because the tools came with a promise so simple it barely needed to be written down. If it breaks, we replace it. Forever. That was it. That was the entire contract. Walk into any of the hundreds, then thousands of Sears locations across the country, hand over a broken wrench, and walk out with a new one. No paperwork, no expiration, no fine print worth worrying about. The promise held for 60 years, through recessions, through wars, through every economic disruption the country endured. And then it didn't. The story of why it stopped holding is not really a story about tools. It is a story about what happens when a brand becomes so valuable that the people who own it stop caring what made it valuable in the first place. The whole thing started with a $500 decision. In 1927, Arthur Barrows ran the hardware department at Sears, Roebuck & Company. Sears at that point was already the largest retailer in the United States, built on the catalog model that Richard Sears had invented 30 years earlier. The idea was that you could mail anything to anyone, anywhere in the country, and they would buy it if the price and quality were right. Barrows wanted a name for the hardware line that sounded like something a serious person would use. He founded at a small company called the Marion Craftsman Tool Company. He paid them $500 for the rights. Sears registered the trademark on May 20th, 1927. The tools themselves were never made by Sears. From the beginning, Craftsman was a brand that Sears applied to tools manufactured under contract by other companies: Stanley, Western Forge, Danaher, and others depending on the year and the product. That arrangement mattered more than most people understood because it meant the brand was the promise, not the factory. What you were buying when you bought Craftsman was not a specific manufacturing process. You were buying the warranty. You were buying Sears' word that the tool would perform, and that if it didn't, Sears would make it right. That promise was introduced with the brand's first-hand tools in 1927, and it did not waver for decades. Tom Dunlap, Barrows' successor at the hardware department, upgraded the quality of the tools and added chrome plating as America moved into the automobile age. The early customer base was farmers, then mechanics, then the suburban homeowners who poured into the new post-war housing developments and discovered that owning a house meant owning a growing list of jobs that required tools. By the 1950s and 60s, Craftsman was the tool eisel of American life. The catalog, hundreds of pages, more than 4,000 products at the brand's height, arrived in the mail and was studied the way some people studied the Bible. Men circled items, made lists, knew the stock numbers by heart. The Sears store was where you went on Saturday morning, and your father let you hold the tools. The weight of a good ratchet, the way the chrome caught the fluorescent light, the click of a socket seating onto a drive. You did not have the vocabulary yet to explain why it felt good, but you knew it did. And when your father's ratchet finally stripped out after 15 years, he drove to Sears, handed it to the man behind the counter, and drove home with a new one. He might have mentioned it at dinner as an afterthought, the way you mentioned something that worked exactly as expected, because that was not remarkable. That was the point. And then a man named Eddie Lampert arrived, and everything the brand had built over 60 years began to come apart in ways nobody could see clearly until it was already too late. Lampert was a hedge fund manager from Yale who had made his reputation identifying distressed assets and extracting value from them. He acquired Kmart's debt when the company was in bankruptcy in 2023, using the bankruptcy process to convert distressed bonds into a controlling ownership stake, and then in 2025, merged Kmart with Sears to create Sears Holdings, the third largest retailer in the United States. He controlled nearly 40% of the new company. Wall Street loved him. The tools inside the company were about to tell a different story. Lampert restructured Sears Holdings into approximately 30 separate business units. Each unit was evaluated on its own profit and loss. Each unit competed against the others through internal bidding for resources, floor space, and budget. The logic was derived from free market theory. Internal competition would produce efficiency. What it actually produced was a company at war with itself. The appliance division competed against the tool division for shelf space. The tool division competed against the lawn and garden division for catalog prominence. Nobody was optimizing for the customer. Everybody was optimizing for their unit's quarterly number. The analysts who studied this later described the structure as management philosophy borrowed from Ayn Rand. That is a kinder description than most. Meanwhile, the tools themselves had been changing for years in ways that longtime customers noticed long before Lampert arrived. Quality decline had begun in the 1970s with cost-cutting on materials. By the 1990s, overseas manufacturing had replaced domestic production across much of the line. By the early 2000s, ratchets that previous generations had used for 20 years were stripping out within months. Customers were returning tools under the warranty, not because the policy was generous, but because the tools were no longer holding up. The warranty, which had originally been a proud statement of confidence, was becoming a quiet admission that the products did not always last. Sears closed over 2,000 stores between 2011 and 2017. The places where you could redeem that warranty were disappearing at the same rate as the tool's reputation for lasting. On January 5, 2017, Stanley Black & Decker announced it had agreed to acquire the Craftsman brand from Sears Holdings. The deal was valued at $900 million, $525 million up front, $250 million after 3 years, plus a royalty on sales for a period of years after. Sears retained a license to continue selling Craftsman products. A year and a half later, on October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company that had once employed 350,000 people and operated over 3,000 stores was gone in any meaningful sense. The arithmetic of what happened is staggering when you sit with it. Arthur Barrows bought the Craftsman name for $500 in 1927. 90 years later, that name sold for $900 million. The brand built on a $500 purchase, applied to tools Sears never manufactured, backed by a warranty that cost real money every time someone came in with a broken wrench, had become one of the most valuable brand names in American retail history, and the company that held it could not survive. Under Stanley Black & Decker, Craftsman is now sold at Lowe's, Ace Hardware, and Amazon. The warranty still exists on paper, though its terms are more complicated than they once were, and the experience of claiming it depends entirely on whether the store you walk into has the right model number in stock. Some men who grew up with Craftsman tools still buy them. Some refuse to because the tools in the red handles today are not made the same way as the ones in the red handles in their father's garages. They are not wrong. What died when Sears died was not just a retailer. What died was the specific arrangement that made the Craftsman promise possible. One company, one warranty, one set of stores where you could walk in anywhere in the country, and the transaction was simple and the outcome was certain. That arrangement required a company healthy enough to honor it, stores present enough to fulfill it, and management willing to invest in the product rather than extract from the brand. When those conditions ended, the promise ended with them. There are still Craftsman tools in garages across this country, stamped with a USA marking and a 4-digit code that tells you exactly which company forged the steel and exactly when. Men who know what they are looking at buy those tools used, off auction sites and estate sales, because they know something about them that no modern replacement can reproduce. They were made to be used for a lifetime, and they were backed by a company willing to say so in writing, with no time limit and no receipt required. If you found this worth your time, subscribe. There are more of these stories, and every one of them ends with something that mattered more than most people knew while it was still there.